What's up, you sick mother bluffers? It's only been a few days since I got torched and had one of my biggest losing sessions, so I was in no particular rush to get back at the tables. But when Chicago vlogger Broker Poker hit me up to say he was going to be at Portland Meadows, I couldn't pass on this opportunity to meet and play with a fellow content creator. So on to Portland Meadows I go. Roll the tape. Here we are inside Portland Meadows, one of the best poker clubs in town, and I'm here tonight to meet and play with Brandon from Broker Poker. Super nice guy. Make sure to go check out his channel. I'll throw a link to it in the description box, as well as a link to his video from this session. Go check it out and leave a comment. Let him know MD Poker sent you. Without further ado, let's get into it. What better way to kick off a Portland poker vlog than with a bump pot? In this one, we're playing 5-2-2, and 8 of us see a flop of 9-10-6 2 hearts on top, 8-9-4 2 hearts on bottom. I'm in under the gun with King Jack 10 8-7. I flop an open-ended straight draw on both boards. Action checks around. The turn is pretty interesting. It comes a 10 on top and a 6 on bottom. I pick up trip 10s on top, giving me a chance to boat up on the river, and I make the nut straight on bottom. Small blind checks to me. I bet 25 bucks, and 4 players make the call. 5 ways to the river, which comes a king on top and the 7 of hearts on bottom. I've got the nuts on top, kings over 10s, and I improve to a jack high straight on bottom. I only lose to a flush, but there's a lot of hearts already out, so maybe I got nut. We'll find out soon enough. Small blind checks. I bet 150, and 2 players make the call. Going to showdown, the low jack shows ace queen of hearts for the nut flush on both boards. What a sick river for them. They got the nuts on bottom, but I've got the nuts on top with my full house, so we're going to chop this one. In this one, there's a straddle to 4 on the button. Brandon calls before I look down an ace jack in the big blind. I raise it up to 20, under the gun calls, hijack calls, and the button calls. We're going 4 ways to a flop of queen jack jack rainbow. I absolutely smashed this one. This is a spot where I'm going to mix in some c-bets and some checks. With some straight draws possible, it's probably best to c-bet. But since there's no flush draws, this board looks safe enough to throw in a check for deception. Undergun checks, hijack bets 50, button folds. I decide to just call, and undergun folds. Heads up to the turn, which comes a safe 3 of hearts. I check once again, hoping my opponent fires again, but unfortunately they check back. The river comes a brick. I'm not checking this time. I want to try and get a call from a queen, so I'm going to bet on the smaller side here. I make it 80 bucks. I think with the draws breaking out, I could have actually gone closer to a pop bet, make it look like a bluff, and get max value if my opponent decided to hero call. It doesn't matter in the end because they make the fold. Nice start to the session. In this one, action folds to the middle position player who opens to 12. It folds to me and I look down at ace king on the button. If you watched my last vlog, you know I have a complicated relationship with ace king at the moment. I'm not going to let that cloud my judgment though, gotta do what I gotta do. I 3-bet to 40 and the middle position player makes the call. They seem to be one of the most active and loosest players at the table, so I'm definitely happy to be going heads up in position against them. And the flop comes 9 ace 9 rainbow. They check to me. On this super dry board, I'm going to target a worse ace or some middling pocket pair and down bet to 30, and they make the call. The turn comes the 4 of hearts, opening up a flush draw. They check to me for a second time, and I'm thinking about how much to bet here. There's just over 140 in the pot, and it looks like they have just under 190 behind. It's a bit awkward, but in game, I decide that at this point, if they have a hand like ace queen or ace jack, there's a good chance they'll find a call if I shove. So I bet 189, and they snap call. Uh-oh. We're all in and going to the river.
You got a 9? Dude, I'm ready.
Oh my god, dude. You are...
Damn, dude.
Damn, what a brutal river for my opponent. I mean, sure, them opening and calling my raise out of position was a little on the looser side, but once they flopped trips, they had a dream spot versus a player like me who seems to be having a really hard time not punting with ace king lately. Thankfully for me, the ace from space on the river comes to my rescue, and I stack them. Rough one, man. GG. In this one, I look down a king jack suited in the small blind. The hijack limps. Folds to me, I bump it up to 15 and they make the call. Heads up to a flop of king 4-7 rainbow. Once again, super dry board. I can go either way between betting and checking. This time I decide to check and they check back. The turn comes to 3 of diamonds, opening up a flush draw. 5-6 gets there, but I'm not too concerned about that. I fired a delayed c-bet of 20 and my opponent makes the call. The river comes the 8 of spades. Looking back on this hand, I think the best play is probably to check, since there's not a ton of hands I'm getting value from here apart from king 10 or pocket 9s. The way my opponent played this hand, it looks more like they have a busted diamond draw, but it could also play pocket 8s like this, which revert a set. So yeah, if I bet, they'll probably just fold their missed flush draws and raise with a set. If I check, I can induce a bluff from diamonds, and if they have a set, well, I'm probably going to pay them off, but at least I'm not opening the door to getting raised. All this to say, I think I should check, but I bet 35, and they call. I show my hand, and it's good, so lucky for me I was able to get some value here, but yeah, in the long run, I'm not sure I like this bet on the river. In this one, action folds to me in the low jack, and I look down at 2 black aces. I open to 20, and I get called by the hijack and under the gun players. We go 3 ways to a flop of 10 jack 8 2 diamonds. Not the best flop, but when under the gun checks to me, I can't give my opponents a free turn card, so I c-bet for 40, hijack calls, and under the gun folds. Heads up to the turn, which comes a 9 of clubs, putting a 4-liner to a straight. This board is getting worse and worse. I don't know about you guys, but this is a spot where I feel like if I check, I'm basically playing my hand face up and opening the door for my opponent to bluff me. So I decide to go for a blocker bet, which I actually like. I think it's a pretty solid play. What I also like is that I take a moment to see how much my opponent has behind, and it looks like they have roughly 180 bucks. So the plan is to bet and fold to an all-in. So overall, pretty happy with how I'm playing this hand so far. However, I do manage to fuck things up by betting 80 bucks. And of course, my opponent snap jams for 178. The problem with betting 80 is that now I only need to have the best hand 25% of the time to make this a profitable call. That's not a reason to compound my mistake with another though, and even if my opponent could be using this card to bluff me off my hand with the diamond draw, I just don't think they're bluffing here, so I end up making the fold. My opponent was kind enough to show king queen for the nut straight. Even though I'm really not happy with my sizing on the turn, I'll pat myself on the back for not making a stubborn call with aces and punting off another 100 bucks. In this one, there's a limp from the under the gun 1 and middle position players before action folds to me in the cutoff, and I look down at ace jack offsuit. I raise to 15 and only under the gun 1 makes the call. We go heads up to a flop of 6-4-9 2 clubs. Under the gun 1 checks to me. I don't think a c-bet is necessary here with ace high, but I decide to bet 15 anyway, and my opponent makes the call. The turn comes to jack of spades, giving me top pair. Under the gun 1 now leads for 25. Not really sure what to make of this, so I'm going to proceed with caution here and just call. My opponent checks in the dark as the river comes to king of hearts. I am a little bit confused at this point. I'm not sure what hands I'm getting value from except for queen jack or jack 10. Anyway, I end up checking back, and my opponent shows jack 4 suited for turn 2 pair. I definitely wasn't expecting to see that hand. I laugh it off. My opponent is actually a super friendly and funny guy, so take my chips, sir. Back to the bomb pot streets, we're playing 5-2-2. 8 of us see a flop of 3-8 queen 2 spades on top, 5-6-4 2 clubs on bottom. I'm on the button with ace queen queen 9-9, so I flop the nuts on top, and I pick up the third nut, queen high flush draw on bottom. Ashton checks to the low jack or bets 10, the hijack calls. Brandon raises to 50. This is kind of a dicey spot because if this was hold'em with a single board, I would always raise with top set with a flush draw on the board, obviously, but with 5 cards and 2 boards, I don't really think there's a point in protecting my hand. I will always get called by strong spade draws that either have a mate hand or a strong draw on bottom, so I'm just going to make the call and hope that the run out is clean. It folds back around to the low jack, who makes the call. 3 ways to the turn, which comes to 6 of spades on top, completing the flush draw. Bottom is interesting though, it's the ace of clubs, so I improve to the second nut flush. I'm a little bit concerned when the low jack decides to lead after getting raised on the flop, even though it's only for 50. Brandon seems to slow down and just calls. Kind of a weird spot where it looks like I'm pretty strong, but honestly, I've played enough bomb pots to know that one of my opponents could have the nut flush on bottom. I don't think it's Brandon though, as I would expect him to raise, and I would expect the low jack to bet more if they had it, but I'm just going to make the call here. Still 3 ways to the river, which comes the 7 of clubs on top. Still 3 ways to the river, which comes to 7 of clubs on top, which now also put a straight on the board. The good news is I blocked the nut straight twice with my 2 9s, and the bottom straight is blocked once with the 4 and 5 on the bottom board, so it's not a huge concern. And bottom comes the 3 of clubs, which puts a possible straight flush on the board. The good news there is 5 deuce of clubs is the only straight flush possible, with the 7 of clubs being on top. So even though they're not great rivers for my hand, I don't think they change much in the end. The low jack goes all in for their last 71 bucks, and once again, Brandon makes the call. I don't love it, but I can't possibly fold for that price, so I make the call. And going to showdown, the low jack shows ace deuce of spades for the turn nut flush on top, and the jack high flush on bottom. They think they're scooping, but my queen high flush turns out to be good, as Brandon mucks, so I end up chopping with the low jack. In this one, Brandon is going to open up the action to 10 bucks from under the gun. I'm next to act, and I look down at pocket 4s. I make the call. Middle position calls, cutoff calls, and the button calls. I'm sure Brandon is thrilled to be going 5 ways to a flop. Of ace 4 8, I flop a set on an ace high board, and pa-da-pa-pa-pa, I'm loving it. Brandon starts things off with a check. I'm going to check as well, and unfortunately for me, action checks around. The turn comes the 9 of hearts. Brandon checks again, and even though the overly anxious side of me acknowledges that with 4 other players in the hand, there's a chance a set of 8s or 9s could be lurking out there, I can't possibly check with bottom set, so I fire a bet of 30, and sadly everybody folds. In this one, I pick up pocket 9s from under the gun and open to 10. Under the gun 1 calls, cutoff calls, and the small blind calls. We're going 4 ways to a flop of queen, queen 7, 2 clubs. Small blind checks to me. I like to take a stab at paired boards as a pre-flop aggressor. I see bet for 15, and everybody folds. Easy game. You know what? This session is going a little too smoothly. I bought in for 400, and I'm up 500 bucks in a couple of hours. I think it's time for a punt. In this one, the button straddles to 5, folds to me in the big blind, and I look down at king queen offsuit. I raise it up to 20, and the button straddler is the only player to make the call. We're going heads up to a flop of deuce jack 9 rainbow. With 2 overcards and a gut shot, I continue for 20, and my opponent quickly makes the call. I would love to improve on the turn. I don't. It's the 8 of spades. I don't really know what I'm trying to get a fold from. All I know is I want my opponent to fold. Hopefully, this second barrel of 60 bucks will do the trick. No snap call this time. My opponent gives it a little bit more thought before calling. Shit. I'm going to need a king, queen, or jack here, and the river comes the 7 of spades. Ugh. Well, I don't think king high is ever good here, and you know, I guess the 7 of spades is not a bad card to bluff on, as it puts a 4-liner to a straight, it completes a spade draw. I think I can get hands as good as 2 pair to fold, maybe even a set or a straight if I go big enough. Plus, I know my image is on the tighter side. I haven't gotten out of line since the start of the session, so I think that grants me some extra fold equity. I load up a 3rd bullet and fire for 175. I relax a little bit when I fade the snap call. My opponent goes into the tank. Come on, man. Fold. 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 Fold.
375.
Fuck! Goodbye, 275 bucks. It was nice knowing you. In this one, action folds to me and I pick up aces in the low jack. I open to 12 bucks. I get called by the hijack, cutoff, and big blind, who is the same player that checked in the dark before. And once again, they check in the dark as we go 4 ways to a flop of 3-10 deuce rainbow. Once again, could go either way between c-betting and checking for deception. I think there's probably a 10 hanging around that I can get value from, so I bet 20. The hijack folds, the cutoff calls, and the big blind snap calls. They once again check dark as the turn comes the 9 of spades. I'm still going to target a 10. I fire a 2nd bullet for 75 bucks, and both players make the fold. Couple more hands for you guys. In this one, we're playing 5-2-2. I start off with queen, 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 4 deuce in middle position. Top comes 5-10-9 2 diamonds, and bottom comes 6-9 queen. the case queen giving me top set and the current nuts on bottom. With nothing and almost no chance to make a decent hand on top, I decide the best course of action is for me to have several players put money in the pot and hope that bottom runs out clean. Cutoff bets 15, big blind calls, under the gun calls, and I make the call. 4 ways to the turn, which comes a 10 on top and a jack on bottom, putting it possible straight on the board. Action checks again to the cutoff, who continues for 30, under the gun calls. I'm getting a great prize to try and boat up, so I make the call as well. 3 ways to the river, which comes a king on top and a break 4 of clubs on bottom. Under the gun now shoves for 166, and now it's decision time. Is top set ever good here? I think if under the gun turned a straight, they would have either bet or check raised. If cutoff turned a straight, I think they would have bet more than 30 bucks into a pot of 100. Plus, there's a bunch of blockers to the straight with 2 10s and the king on top. Ultimately, I decide to make the call, and the cutoff folds. Headed to showdown, and under the gun shows pocket kings for a full house on top, and my set does turn out to be good. We chop. Last hand of the vlog, thank you so much if you made it this far. If you're even remotely enjoying the content, please do me a favor and hit the thumbs up button. It really helps getting this video to more degen poker enthusiasts such as yourself. In this one, under the gun 1 limps before I look down at ace jack in middle position. I bump it up to 15, the button calls, and the under the gun 1 limper calls. We're going 3 ways to a flop, a 4 queen 5 rainbow. Action checks to me. I throw out a c-bet of 15 purely to try and take this hand down. The plan partially works as only the button makes the call. Heads up to the turn, which comes the 10 of clubs. I pick up the nut straight draw, and I have the ace of clubs as an overcard and a good bluff candidate if the river comes another club. It looks like my opponent has about 50 bucks behind. That's the amount I wager, and they make the fold. This concludes this episode. I was in for 400, quickly ran it up to almost 1,000 bucks, only to drop back down to almost 500. In the end, I managed to run it back up to 650, booking a profit of 250. Overall, it was a very fun session. Everyone at the table was super cool, and it was great meeting Brandon. Once again, don't forget to check out his channel and show a fellow vlogger some support. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck at the tables, and I'll catch you in the next one.